Today we will shift our focus to Southeast Asia and talk to Dr. Walter Tonetto. Now he is the founder of Nusantara Trust and IndoCoin, which is a new currency aimed at building an ecosystem that can bring in the best of breed technologies to a very huge captive market. And the first focus of this initiative is Indonesia. So hang around and become a part of our conversation in the next segment. Hi Walter, thank you for joining me today.
Yes, good morning, Zazika. Hello.
Okay, great. So we'll start talking about Indonesia, right? So the thing is, can you talk about what blockchain is doing in Indonesia right now?
Well, it's a very simple question to answer. It's doing very little, and there are various reasons for that. There are some blockchain. There's now a formal blockchain association, and there's smaller pockets of blockchain players, or those that are interested in blockchain for various reasons. But it's not really having the traction yet with government. We're having discussions. My company, our three companies, Nusantara Trust, PTE Ltd, an Indonesian company, PT Nusantara Trust Indonesia. We're having various discussions at various levels of government to create an awareness for that, for the possibilities of blockchain, for not only the possibilities, but for the inevitability of blockchain, really. Because it's something that we see as wholly inevitable.
Right. So compared to other countries in Southeast Asia, where would you say Indonesia stands right now in adoption of blockchain?
It's very awkward when you're comparing a toddler, let's say, that's trying to make its first tentative steps into the world with some that are already up and running around and jumping around. That would be the kind of comparison. Indonesia is still a toddler. It's still trying to find its feet. It's still trying to get its bearings on that. So it's kind of an unfair comparison to enter them into any kind of competitive analysis. It's right there at the start, but as happens so often, there's the possibility of leapfrogging it. I think maybe we can touch upon some of the political complexities that are perhaps stymieing the adoption of blockchain and other light technologies we're talking about. We're talking about blockchain today. We're talking also about IoT, of course, and AI, because there is a real convergence factor that we need to consider here when we're talking about especially long-term prognosis,
So that was my next question. I wanted to know if blockchain is doing anything outside of the finance world in Indonesia.
Well, we're having discussions in terms of what we're intending, and I guess we're getting to that a little later. And it's more the applied uses of blockchain, where we're approaching an association, and we have approached various associations, and we have various partnerships and MOUs, and some that are pending. Let's say with the Chamber of Commerce. I think we have 2.5 million users. They're very keen to roll out the blockchain services for their members that we're offering them. Just give you one example, there's also some other state-owned companies where clearly we show them something in terms of the organizational structure, something that's not working or is not working very well, and how we could, other things being reasonably equal, improve upon that.
Indonesia in general is really very vast, right? I think it has tens of thousands of islands and I think 30 provinces.
34, so, yes, there's 34 provinces, and of course 17,000 islands, they say, give or take, of course.
Right. So I was just wondering if this technology could sort of help in the governance.
Yes, absolutely can help in the governance. What I see, and this should be maybe said at the outset, there is the kind of the contrarian stream that we're all peddling against, because the beauty of blockchain, of course, is the fact it's a distributed architecture. It's decentralized and distributed, so it actually gives let's say the dispossessed, the ones that are disenfranchised from the present political model, it gives an opportunity to enter. And of course, this is a problem we have in the whole of Southeast Asia, and I think in most of the world, is the kind of the neoliberalist agenda that's sweeping everything away. In other words, it goes in the opposite direction. It goes towards privatization. It goes towards making government big and stronger. It helps corporations. I mean, there's a huge problem that India has been facing with that so-called green revolution, of course, leading to the suicide of 270,000 farmers over 10 years. And it's an ongoing thing with Indian farmers. And these are basically neoliberal policies, and aided by the World Bank and other bodies that actually have a very predatory nature. They're also creating huge havoc in Africa, Africa used to be self-sufficient in terms of its food supplies, and is now totally dependent again, except to Greece, where these predatory funds, hedge funds, and so on move in to models, and they call this aid packages, and of course it leads to impoverishment. It leads to loss of IP, of sovereignty of the people. So this is something that we're all beholden to, and Indonesia is subject to that as well. These kind of neoliberal confusions, and of course the whole blockchain agenda is contrarian to that, because it seeks to again empower the little people. Again, it seeks to spread things out more equitably. So there is. Do you understand? So this is kind of this conflict that many at the subconscious level would be aware of. They don't understand what blockchain is, but they know if it talks about ceding power or creating less of a disequilibrium, then of course it's anathema to them. Yeah, that's something that they're going to be resisting.
Right. So keeping the politics away from this, what do you think the region can do to sort of encourage the adoption of a technology like this? Just keeping the politics apart.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do that, of course, to keep the politics totally out of it. But the region certainly, and this is probably from private initiatives, it's probably from certain impact investors that actually nourish an ecosystem. Because there are many enterprises that I'm aware of, and there's many technologists that are kind of very open to this distributed architecture of the internet, to this decentralized yearning, and they should be encouraged. They should be assisted in different ways, and that invariably does not come from government, not in Southeast Asia. It comes from private benefactors, maybe from small funds, that do pro bono activity as well, that don't always see the outcome of it, a wad of cash in hand, that see maybe some of the long-term benefits. So that has to come from there. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
That's okay.
So where do you think the popularity of blockchain will actually arise from? Like the full-fledged thing, will it come from like the bigger enterprises or the medium and the smaller businesses?
Okay, the major enterprises that they're playing in Indonesia currently in the fintech sector, and most of them, if you look at that carefully enough, they're Ponzi schemes. Okay, they're giving absurd cashbacks, 60% up to 100% cashbacks, unsustainable business models. But clearly, theirs is a short-term strategy of building scale, volume, then going to market and flipping it basically, on an exchange. And again, it's a money-making exercise for the investors. And so they don't have that instinct. They don't have certainly the wherewithal financially, but they don't have the instinct to really do something broad-based. So this kind of impulse, unfortunately, we do not find in the big companies, because their bottom lines, their whole economic model is flawed. So it's going to come from the smaller to medium enterprises. Yeah.
Let's speak about IndoCoin a little bit.
Okay, so IndoCoin is now arguably, we don't see ourselves as disruptive. I mean, we kind of eschew this kind of verbiage. We don't talk about cryptocurrencies very much, and we talk maybe only a little about blockchain, because blockchain can be explained in many different ways. Cryptocurrencies at the moment is a negative, has a negative bite taste for most people, and that also the fact that many people there are. I'm supposing at least 1 million Indonesians that are investors and speculators with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, of course, is a classic, whatever you think of it, it's a classic investor stock, a speculator stock. And of course, we are building something that has very, very serious use cases attached to it. And we're moving in the direction of building a stable coin, something that can be used as a hedging tool, as a hedging instrument. But we see ourselves as an aggregator of technologies. So we bring best of breed blockchain technologies into our fold, and we distribute that across a huge network that we have, and build thus an ecosystem of consequence. That's tied obviously to real use cases. And that's something that blockchain, globally speaking, has really not been doing very well, building real use cases.
Right. So you mentioned stable coins. Now this is a term like I have heard a lot, but can you just explain it a little bit?
Hello. Sorry, my connection seems to be very. Stablecoin, yes, please.
Yeah, so like, can you explain it a little bit? Yeah.
Please. Sorry, you wanted to say something apropos stablecoin? Or,
Yeah,
okay.
I just wanted to know what, a stable coin is, because, I mean, what do you mean a coin is stable and the other coin is unstable? I mean, what does that mean?
I mean, it's obviously all relative. Obviously, a stablecoin would have the properties of having less volatility than most of the other currencies. The problem is with all global currencies that they're pegged to the greenback. And this allows, of course, the Fed to have this exorbitant control over economies. If something happens to the Fed, which, as we know, is a private body, it's not a government body, something happens to the Fed, the rupiah goes down. And that kind of volatility is because of the fact that it's paired, it's paired to the USD. With the stable coin, the characteristics that we will have over a number of years, of course, there's no automaticity that when we bring it onto the market, it will be immediately stable. No. When there's a perception of value and there's a real application in manifold use cases, then it will have the evolution. It will follow that route towards becoming something that's more stable. We always have to say it's comparatively speaking more stable, because you can, in an econometric sense or in any sense that you care to look at it, you can't wholly decouple something from other currencies, a basket of currencies, and from other economies. That interlinkage is just too intense and too deep. But certainly, relatively speaking, it should afford much, much more stability for the user, for the owner of the coins, and give Indonesian economy thus over long term a much, much stronger outcome than, in other words, the Asian financial crisis that we had before. It's something that could in part be averted, not wholly averted, but for those that are the owners of IndoCoin, then of course are going to have a much, much stronger presence, a much stronger buying power, let's say.
Right. So that was about cryptocurrency, right? It won't be too incorrect to say that the popularity of blockchain and cryptocurrency in general came from the idea of Bitcoin. But what I have understood is that cryptocurrency and blockchain can be separated to quite a distance, right? So exactly how much impact can cryptocurrency have, say, in the economy or finance sector? And is it much different from what blockchain, the sort of impact blockchain can have? Is it different?
So blockchain, as we know, is the infrastructure in the cryptographic hashes performed upon this infrastructure, what we call cryptocurrencies. Now, cryptocurrencies is not just something that translates into money. We need to be aware of that distinction. It's an exchange of value. It's a recognition of value. It's an ascertainment of value. It's a verification of value. So it has a whole basket of possibilities that go beyond what we presently think of as an exchange of value. Because at the moment, unfortunately, we think in terms of the fiat. We think what translates back into my currency, US dollar or Indonesian rupiah, and we see that as soon as that's realized, that exchange is complete. And I think cryptocurrencies are going to move in a slightly different direction. Over long term, I think in a fundamentally different direction, because we're moving in the direction basically of the need for a universal basic income. Totally inevitable, totally necessary, and something that the current configuration of our neoliberal world is totally at odds with, because it seems to be giving something for nothing. It seems to be then supporting the idle and so on. But as we know that with automation and with AI and robotics moving at pace, hundreds of millions of people will become not unemployed, but unemployable. So, in order to avert really widespread unrest and revolutions and so on, we will have to have universal basic income. So as you can see, when you put that together, that the certainty of that, then you're seeing that the possibilities of then in the cryptographic exchanges of giving the exchange of value, which does not always have a monetary value at the outcome of it. You understand? But it gives me, let's say, for want of a better phrase, that gives me some brownie points in terms of my community. That my tribe, my community accepts me. I have access to health services or certain other things, or to bartering protocols, okay, that otherwise I would not have. And this is certainly something that the blockchain enables, and that we can give any kind of name. So this cryptographic exchange, or this cryptocurrency, is going to take forms other than money. especially I think one of the new hubs is going to be this reputation model, the evolution of various kind of reputation models. And these reputation models should be co-scripted by the community. The difference between cryptocurrencies and blockchain, points of differentiation. So we need to consider increasingly what happens in terms of the cryptographic element on the blockchain, in exchange of value that is not just a currency in terms of a monetary store of value. Okay, it's going to take a manifold other forms in terms of attribution of value, and signaling, of course, reputation management elements. So that my reputation could be for being of benefit in various, let's say, currently intangible ways to my community, that via very sophisticated blockchain architectures that find this attribution of value and that give me credit in my community. And that could then become maybe a point of barter, so I can maybe get a meal for that. I get certain things, even material things in my community then. But I think as I said, this is coupled to the idea that we must get away from this idea of infinite growth. As we know, that's totally unsustainable on this planet when we talk about global warming and other things, yeah? So it's part of this complex, this conjury of difficulties. And clearly blockchain can take a major role in that, in enabling the shift, this realignment towards a new notion of what is actually valuable and what is reputation.
So I was just thinking, regulatory-wise, where is Indonesia right now, and how do you think the regulatory scene will change this year?
I think President Jokowi is on record as saying is that the regulation is going to be following the business. Now, that's a nice thing to say, and that's probably a nice wording that a scriptwriter put before him. We will have to see if that actually translates into requisite action. At the moment, BI is clearly on a wait-and-see mission, and it depends on how that negotiation occurs. It's now speaking again to my own purposes in terms of IndoCoin.com. What we're doing with IndoCoin is we're having a dialogue. We will be having a dialogue with BI and OJK, the financial regulator, and companies like us. They need to seek that dialogue and need to kind of assure the regulator as well, and of course the regulator connected to the political process, that this is beneficial for the political process and it's beneficial to the people. And when that assurance is there, it should be much easier to get the enablement of that. We ourselves will not actually be very much subject to that in the initial phase, because we can internal to an organization. We have an MOU with an organization of nearly 100 million members. So we can launch our token, our coin, internal to the organization. If the regulator, for whatever strange reason, might seek to stymie us in the beginning. And that in itself then, seeing the utility and the greatness of that idea, that's going to then propagate, it's going to force the hand of OJK, let's say, if they were still at that point, still holding out on some.
So the thing is, the predominance of Bitcoin and Ethereum, is it just the same in Indonesia as it is all over the world? And do you think it's going to break anytime soon?
Yes, it's the same in Indonesia as anywhere else, because IndoDAX, let's say, gets its feeds from other global exchanges, and the reference points, the global two reference points is this duopoly, if you will, between Ethereum and Bitcoin, and that's going to have to be broken at some point, not for the sake of breaking something, this kind of parasite, if you will. You don't want to kill off the parents. That's not what I mean here. It's not disrupting the disruptor. But really, there needs to be more independence of cryptocurrencies. And that will happen, of course, as the use cases of other cryptocurrencies, what I believe will happen with IndoCoin.com, is once we demonstrate the use cases in the market and the value is realized in the market, then there's going to be less dependency on the parents, if you will, on the Bitcoin, on the Ethereum.
So that brings us to the end of our conversation. Thank you for joining me, Walter.
Thank you, Zazika. Thank you for making the time.
So that's the end of today's episode. Join me again next time as I explore another interesting use case of blockchain. Till then, don't forget to visit our website to learn more about DLT and the extensive work we are doing with it. Bye.